there were two other pieces of media we're going to talk about, which is also Blackish and American Fiction.
Yeah.
Um, I did want to talk about American Fiction because I feel like it does American Society of Magical Negroes better because it is a very
Hmm.
solid film. And, it won an Oscar for Best Adapted Screenplay, which it deserved. But I feel like, me personally, the movie missed some marks when it was talking about diversity. I know it's talking about diversity in publishing, which I can understand, but I feel like because the movie is based off a book that was written in the 90s, it's a bit outdated for the conversation that we have now. And I could be wrong because we just talked about the Good Times reboot, which was really bad and like
Yeah. Yeah.
harped on a lot of stereotypes. So I could be wrong, but I feel like for the most part, when you talk about media, we already understand that like black people do not fit into like a box and a stereotype. Like when you have shows like, not my mind blanking, Insecure, you have shows
Yeah.
like Power, not Power. There are so many shows that I can't think of right now. But like when you have all
Yeah.
these shows with like black casts that are being made, I feel like a lot of times the story of American Fiction gets lost in translation. Not lost in translation, but it's like an outdated story, I guess.
What's interesting, I think, is that when I originally watched it, I didn't feel it to be as outdated as when I watched the director talk about it. Because this is the thing is that I think that while we are no longer so much in the era where they're only making gang movies about black people, like it's always got to be like it's struggling in the hood, like classic, no shade, classic John Singleton movies. Those movies hit, but like that was like the archetype for black movies. I still think that like a lot of black film, even the really really good ones, the series what's the one with the she was in chewing gum and then she wrote her own series. It's like I
May,
May Destroy You
yeah, May I
or
Destroy You?
I May Destroy You, and then also like Moonlight and things like this. Is that they're still like while the thing that we're not selling is this 90s gangster archetype anymore, the thing that we do still sell is black suffering, right? Like the idea that like the thing that makes something like Atlanta so appealing, or the things that make something like Swarm so appealing, it's like specifically this idea of black suffering. And while it appears more and more diverse, it's like black people have to struggle on
Mm-hmm.
screen for it to be worth investing in. And I think where I get separated from that point is that I remember watching an interview after he won the Oscar, and he was like, finally, it's not, they're showing that black people can be kinds of different. And it's like, well, that's not a problem. I mean, it is a problem, but it's like lots of different black experiences are happening right now.
Yeah.
Lots of different experiences are being shown. And it's weird to me that instead of being focusing on the aspect that's like, why do black people have to suffer for this to be deemed worthy of funding? Why are you focusing on the aspect that's like, they'll never show like a nerdy black man like me? Like, it's like, that's not the point. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, and it's like you specifically exist in the realm where they want you. Like you are the person who they are bigging up right now. They want the intellectual in a suit, smart black man, and like that's
Mm-hmm.
what they want. And it just gets to me, I think.
Yeah. I do see what you're saying. And I feel like also the director, I feel like he made a good choice picking Jeffrey Wright to play like Monk because Jeffrey Wright is also known for playing like the guy in the glasses who's like the smart guy and like ask all the questions. Like he was in Westworld and Batman. He's always the man like trying to like figure out what's going on. And another thing that his interview at the Oscars was interesting because how do I say this? I still think that like he's right, like the film is right. There are a lot of stories that aren't being told because of like the gatekeepers in media, but Cory Jefferson is a light-skinned black man and I think that like I don't know. Sometimes I still think about like colorism that exists in like Hollywood, and I'm glad that
Yeah.
this movie was made, but I do know that a lot of times like creators only make stories that are a reflection of themselves, which is fine. But I think like Cora Jefferson having this movie and it's really good, it's really great, and I loved it. But I cannot help but think about the fact that like Tracy Ellis Ross died in the first 20 minutes of this film. You have
Yeah.
Tracy Ellis Ross. Her name is on the poster of this movie, and she's gone.
Yeah.
And now we're just focusing the story on two black men and a love interest who isn't really there for the most part. And then you have Issa Rae, who is a phenomenal actress, but she's barely in the movie. So the story is
Yeah.
really centered around like two black men. So it
Yeah.
feels really interesting to have like a story where like certain black stories aren't told that often. Yeah, that's very true. And as a black woman, I see that very often. And the fact that you
Yeah.
have sidelined the black women in this movie to like a couple of lines is really interesting, especially because like Tracy Ellis Ross, Golden Globe winner Tracy Ellis Ross,
Yeah.
dies. And I feel like her
Yeah.
perspective would have been really interesting because I'm sure Erica Alexander's character would not have been the only person who would have had something to say about Weeze lives in the ghetto, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's interesting because I think what happens is necessary to the plot, but
Mm-hmm.
also you just didn't have to write the plot that way. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? Where it's like you hit the point where there, if she doesn't die, Monk's life is together, right? But you also didn't have to write the plot to where he needs his sister to die for
Mm-hmm.
there to be like some sort of form of conflict, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's genuinely, yeah, it was a shock when she dies because I was like, she's so bright on screen, you know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? And it's like, oh yeah, that for while she's there, she lights up the screen, but it's like, yeah, the story needs the conflict. He can't be happy. We make the sister the one that brings like the joy and the peace, and then we kill her off. And yeah, I think this is like, I think what this is like, it's the Boondocks problem,
Hmm.
right? Not to keep referencing the Boondocks, but the Boondocks has no important black female characters. Like genuinely, like when you stop to think about like the main cast, the show, who's giving depth, who's giving interesting, there's side characters who are black and come in and pop out, but there are no like main cast important black women. And it's kind of one of those things where it's like, okay, why? Just why? And there's so many like Monk's girlfriend, his mother, their their help, right? The woman who they paid to clean up and take care of their mom, the
Mm-hmm.
sister. It's like you create all these characters who have depth, they just don't get any time. They get no time, they get no exploration, they exist and then they're gone.
Mm-hmm.
As for Monk's development in particular, but Monk and his brother do get a lot of character development, right? And yeah, I don't know. I think that like as much of an issue as it can be, it's the problem with Atlanta. It's the problem with Boondocks. It's that like a lot of the black men who have this opportunity to tell black stories, often neglect black women's stories like a lot. The only one that I think is inherently maybe a little excusable is Moonlight because that's inherently like this it's about masculinity and a queer male black experience, but all these other stories have no real justification for there never being depth to any of their like black women characters.
Yeah. And I think that American fiction, I feel like it kind of does what it critiques almost because when you kill off Tracy Ellis Ross, who didn't need to die in the movie, I'll stand by this statement. She didn't need to die because you could have easily had the whole family with him throughout this time in the film and it would have been fine. Because I think that him having to deal with his mom and her Alzheimer's on his own and also his brother, like the family drama pulls away from the whole thing that's happening with his publisher and the book he's trying to write. Like, I get that you want conflict, but you can have one singular conflict in your film. You don't need two pieces of conflict because then we're like pulling attention away from certain things. You know, like at one moment he's helping his family, the next moment he's arguing with his publisher. One moment we're helping his family, next moment he's like talking to this white man who's the director. And then he thinks his mom has left the building and now he's worried and he's scared. He's running after her. Like it just feels like there isn't like there is obviously like a focus in the film, but the family drama I feel like takes away from it. And I really do believe like
Interesting.
you could have had this movie where he's just struggling with his publisher, struggling with these studios that want to adapt his book into a movie, and have his family by his side. You didn't have to like leave him with like his all his Alzheimer ridden mother and his brother who is going through identity crisis, and also this
Eh,
woman he's just met, and also like having to lie about a book that he has written that he doesn't actually want to write, but he wants to prove a point. Like all of this does not need to be
Interesting.
happening in one movie.
Interesting. This is something that I feel like I disagree with you on because I think this is the thing that made me kind of like it was that the author, the book plot kind of takes a back seat to what like feels like a movie for a white audience to me, right?
Mm-hmm.
Feels like a movie for a white audience in which they think they're being tricked into understanding race or things like that. And that's not the most important thing. I feel like I wish the story was written in a way that doesn't kill off or at least gives the black women more interesting characters and maybe doesn't kill off Tracy Ellis Ross. But I think the sly thing of the movie is that it just tricks you into watching a black family. And that to me is like I was like, oh, like the important part of this isn't there's no necessarily resolution in a lot of the conflicts either. You see that it's kind of just here is a slice of life of a black family dynamic that you would normally never see on screen, like a complex. And it's like I Tracy Ellis Ross is so good, and I wish they hadn't written it in a way that kills off this character. But it's like you get to just see black people existing and dealing with a variety of struggles, just relationship issues, dealing with like white people get these stories, right? White people get stories of like taking care of your elders as they get older. What does that look like? What's the struggle there? Little love moments between older people, love moments and struggles with yourself, like relationships with family, like all that stuff to me was like, this is what the trick is that this whole thing is happening where it's like they want to see this story. They want to see fuck the name of the book, right? We struggling, like this whole thug archetype thing. And they've tricked you into just caring about a tender family that has issues. And I think it could be done better. I think it does the thing that I think I agree with you in that it does the thing that it's trying to critique. But I wish, like, I think it's very sly and just making people care about a black family. And I was like, yeah, I think that's what I'd have to rewatch it again. But I just like, that was something that I appreciated. It was like, yeah, at the end of the day, it's like, what did you watch? The book shit doesn't, how much did it matter? It's a minimal amount of the screen time even. Whereas like, what's going on with him and his brother? How does he take care of this? His own personal struggles. It's like taking care of the house, like the most tender and emotional moments are just that between him and his family. And it doesn't really matter whether or not the book actually he got did he get the award? Did he not get the award? Like, why is the movie happening? It's like that's not as important as just watching this family. And I wish it was, I wish it wasn't done in a way that killed off all the black women or,
I totally get what you're saying. I do agree. This movie does do a pretty like, it is like kind of like a sly way of you watching a black family, since this film is kind of like one of those films where it's explaining race to like white people. But I feel like for me personally, I would have just rather have learned about like the book. I would have rather just like
mm,
understood like the critique in the film, because there's one scene where he's like trying to write the book, and I wish I remembered the actor's name who was like acting in this part. But as he's writing it, there are these two actors like acting it out and portraying what he's writing, and I felt like that was so interesting. And when they started introducing that mechanic into the movie, I was like, oh, this is so cool. But you only see it one time and then you never see it again, and that's the only time we ever get a glimpse at like his writing style, or like actually seeing him write the book that he's supposed to be publishing, because writing is
yeah.
not an easy thing to do. And I think if you have an author who is used to writing stories where like it's not a black story, it's a story with a black person in it, and it's something that's
Yeah.
smart, well written, well reviewed, but doesn't sell a lot on the shelves, and he's someone who goes into a random independent bookstore and sees that his books are shoved into like the African American section, and he wants to pull them all off that section and put them into the section he thinks they should be. I want to explore that more. I want to explore his thinking, because I personally don't like Monk. I think that Monk is pretentious and annoying, and I
Yeah.
think that his critique towards Issa Rae's character's book, Weeze Lives in the Ghetto, like I find it to be obviously like uppity, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
he thinks that he's better than her as a writer, and he never took the time to actually like read the book. He never took the time to actually like sit through the actual like reading that she had or hear about the book. Like I don't feel like he actually took the time to like delve deeper into it. And that one scene we have at the end with him and Issa, the two of them together, is the only time we ever get to know about her book, because we're seeing the full movie from Monk's perspective. And as
yeah,
I'm watching the movie, and like Monk is like going on and on about like how like they don't want my story, they don't want real black stories. I'm sitting here like, nigga, what do you know about black stories? What do you know about black
yeah,
stories? Have you read this
yeah,
book? Because he gets upset that like his girlfriend is reading the book that he wrote as a joke, and she also
yeah,
read Issa Rae's book. And I'm just sitting here like, well, I mean, she's reading. I haven't seen you pick up a book this whole movie. Like, I
yeah.
don't understand, why should I trust this guy and his opinion and his thoughts? What makes him more like educated, and what makes him more like knowledgeable than me, someone who reads? I want to know. I want
Interesting.
to see that.
Do you think that the movie wants you to like Monk?
Damn, that's a good question. I don't
Because
know.
because this is the thing is that I think that I didn't get that by I specifically once you get to the moment where he and Issa Rae are having that conversation and she's like, "Why do you think you're better than me?" And
Yeah.
everything she's saying is fully justified. He's been building up this whole story in his head, and it's like you don't know me.
Mhm.
Not only do you not know me, you never gave the chance to know me. You never gave my book a chance. You
Mhm.
never gave any of this a chance. You never saw me as a person. You saw me as the reason why you couldn't succeed.
Mhm.
Monk is ultimately he loses the girl. He doesn't necessarily write the thing. His books aren't recognized in the way that he wants them to. He's still kind of a pretentious asshole. And
Mhm.
it's like he learns to be gentler and softer and he learns some form of a lesson, but I don't think we're supposed to like Monk. He's a dick. Like
Yeah.
he and I don't even think the story wants you to view him as like any less pretentious than he is. And I think it's interesting that you had that reaction because it's like, yeah, no, he's wrong. He's wrong and he wants to it literally kills him inside that
Mhm.
people like his joke book more than anything he's ever written.
Mhm.
And it's like maybe at the end of the day, maybe his books aren't that interesting.
Mhm.
Maybe they're not. Maybe this idea that he has of himself as like this deeply prolific writer who everyone should be respecting for his other works just is his own perception.
Mhm.
We're always seeing it from his perspective, his very selfish perspective. He's selfish at the beginning, and he barely learns to be unselfish at the end through necessity. You know what I mean? Where it's like he has to take care of his mother. He has to. And it's just one of those things where yeah, I think it's interesting because yeah, it's like in the latter half that he's like mad at his girlfriend for reading his book and just it starts being mean to her without any explanation.
Mhm.
And like only in the fictional ending does he win her back.
Yeah.
In the real ending, like in the what he's saying, what really happens is that he doesn't even they're not together. He doesn't
Right.
call her, like nothing happens. And it's
Mhm.
like he's just a dick.
Mhm.
He doesn't get a good happy ending. People like his fake work more than his real work.
Hmm.
He's not above Issa Rae. At
Yeah.
least Issa Rae had some level of authenticity to what she was writing. You know
Mhm.
what I mean? She took the time. She did the research. His was just his drunk imagination of what he thought people wanted. You
Right.
know?
I also wanted to jump back on what you had said earlier about like the family dynamic, because now I realize why they focus so much on the family, because I feel like Monk has this idea of like, I feel like he grew up, this is what I got from the movie. I feel like Monk grew up feeling like he wasn't black enough, or feeling like he
Mm,
wasn't like black in the way that people thought blackness is. And
yeah.
he only thought that because like his family was pretty well off, you know, middle
Yeah.
class, his family was okay. But that was like the idea that he had in his head and the image that he had, because he held his father in such high regard. And as we get to know the family more and we get to understand like what the family was really like when they were younger, we soon learned that like his dad was not faithful and not a great
Yeah. No.
dad. And
No.
that kind of, archetype of a father is something that falls more in line with what people think stereotypically of black fathers. So
Yeah.
he probably didn't want to think of himself as like just any other black person, or like the black person that white people think that he is, because he looks down on those kind of black people. So I feel like he kind of like pushed that away in his mind. And I really feel like that's what kind of led him down this path of like, trying to exist outside the monolith of blackness, which I can understand because, like, I'm a black person that likes alternative music and I love musicals as well. And it took me a while to, like, really get into rap music. Like, I feel really bad saying this, but I only got into rap music because I liked Hamilton so much. And I was
Oh, that's
like,
crazy. Continue.
but, you know, I, God, I feel like in a past life, not in a past life, but like when I was younger, I was more like Monk, where I was kind of like, I'm not that black. Like, I'm not like those people.
Mm,
But seeing Monk kind of come to the realization that, like, your family wasn't this perfect, beautiful, like, standout family that was unlike other black families. Like, your daddy was dirty. He was
yeah.
doing your mama dirty, and you lost your daughter, you lost your sister because she was battling hypertension and stress as black women do. And there's another thing, like, no, I don't need to get on that, but I think that him realizing that as he got to know his family more and as he spent more time with his family, I think that's another thing that really helped him understand that, like, the things that you perceive in your life and the things that you think about yourself are not all right, sir. Like, it's not
Yeah.
100% there, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. It kind of I feel like his ideals, whether or not they intended this, very much so reflect like the whole idea of the talented 10th.
Hmm.
Like I feel like earlier we were talking about, or rather, when we were talking about the American Society of Medical Negroes, I was talking about like there's a specific type of black person who believes that it's like black people's job to uphold themselves. Like it's like the reason why we're not getting to where we are is
Yeah.
because we're not presenting ourselves that way. And like when you see his conflict, Monk's conflict with Issa Rae's character, where he's like, "Why are you writing this story about us? Like your whole series of books is the reason why I can't get black people seen as more than archetypes." And it's like, why do you think that you're better than me? Why do you think that you're not an archetype? Why do you think that this is what brings us up? I think is that crucial like self issue that he has with himself. The reason why he runs away from home, right? Like in the original, it's like you haven't been back in years. You're not dealing with the problems. You're not dealing with us. You have to isolate yourself as this campus professor who deserves this respect, who deserves this attention.
Mm-hmm.
And I think like that's the thing that I think that like is interesting. That's like if you view it from a perspective where you're not meant, he's the protagonist,
Mm-hmm.
but you're not necessarily meant to like him. He does most things wrong.
Yeah.
The one thing that he does is like he cares about his mom and he's kind to what's her name? I can't even remember the lady who like is like cleans for them and so I can't remember her name,
I
but
don't remember her
she
name.
like he does right by her at the end. There's the wedding, it's super sweet, but it's like specifically just like he's not good and he's not right even. And he's right in the sense that like this is the product that they want, but like he just becomes a part of it too. And I think the only lesson he really learns is that whatever barrier that he was trying to keep himself out, like I'm above this, I'm better than these people. It's like, no, we are all having to play this game, whether you be from the elite upper crust family that he is, like, right, his dad is doing his family dirty, but they come from some money, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
they're all just doctors, two doctors, he's a writer, he's a professor, like they come from this upper crust idea of what a black family should be, but he has to play the same game as the black people from poverty that he thinks he's better than.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like no matter what you think you are or how you think you exist, like you're not this special, you're not this only unique black person who lives a different experience. It's like we're all black and
Yeah.
you've made your like you're in your lane, but like you're playing this game.